iCommunity shines a light on the wide array of community news, arts and culture, and prolific charity efforts within the Asian Diaspora networks. It's where the global Indian impact on the ground is celebrated. Log on at iglobalnews.com. Hello and a very warm welcome to today's session of the Living Bridge Conversations, the live series brought to you by iGlobal, your multimedia hub for and about global Indians. I'd like to wish you a very warm welcome and thank you so much for joining us here today. And we're joined today by someone who's going to bring a ray of sunshine into our lives in many ways than one. I'm, first of all, your host for today, Tony Patty, and I'm joined by Riddhi Vyas. And Riddhi Vyas is a wellness and meditation expert. Riddhi Vyas qualified as a yoga and meditation teacher at the Sivananda Vedantic Center. And she's since developed a passion for yoga, philosophy, and psychology. Now, she was fascinated by how teachings from the Vedic scriptures and pranayama have influenced Western psychology. Now, Riddhi Vyas regularly shares the practical teachings of yoga and meditation with professionals of all ages and backgrounds, providing strategies for work-life balance. Now, Riddhi has also spoken at the British Parliament, Ministry of Defence, various radio stations and various universities across the country with the single aim to rise as conscious leaders. Isn't that just wonderful? I told you she was going to bring a ray of sunshine into our lives today on this rather dull and gloomy, chilly November afternoon. Hello, Riddhi, and a very warm welcome to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
It's lovely to see you, Riddhi. Thank you so much for being with us. And by the way, just before we kick off, a quick word for our viewers. This show is yours too. And drop us your comments and questions, and we'll pick them up in the course of our conversation as we go along. So you're very welcome, and do drop us a line and be very much part of this show with us today. Riddhi, so here we are then on a somewhat gloomy November afternoon. It's not great outside, but I'm hoping that you're going to bring a ray of sunshine into our lives today in more ways than one. So psychology and meditation and all these things besides, my goodness, you're a jack of all trades, but a master of all of them, which is fantastic. First of all, I want to kick off by saying thank you for joining us. And let's talk about meditation today. First things first. What is meditation? What's it all about?
So fantastic question, Tony. And meditation is just one of those things where we hit the psychology, we hit the mindset, and we hit the science all at the same time. So scientifically speaking, it's about the neural pathways. And think of these as like tiny little wires that are all jumbled, all in a particular way. Now, if you keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, you get the same habits. The same loops keep appearing. You keep getting the same results over and over again. And the very definition of insanity is when you keep doing the same thing over and over again. So meditation is this place where you can literally get still. You can still the mind, even if it's just for a moment. And that moment is a glimpse of the sunshine where you can just sit and observe what's going on, observe what's happening behind the veils so that you're more aware, you're more conscious of what's happening first. That consciousness leads to fantastic things.
No, I get that. And thank you for explaining that. But, meditation can be quite life transforming in a way. And meditation is, to me, defined as the perfect resting state of the body, almost going to sleep.
Fantastic, exactly. So Om is basically looking at these three states. It's looking at the state of sleep, it's looking at the state of being awake, and it's looking at the state of being in deep sleep. So that's spelled AUM, and it's broken down into 3 syllables for a particular reason. And that particular reason is that we're looking at the physical body, we're looking at the mental body, and we're looking at the astral body. So there's all of this energy, and we are fantastic, unlimited beings. It's the ego consciousness that limits us.
You know, the great thing about meditation is, Riddhi, is that I've heard it being said before that it is the practice of which makes the distinction that we are not body but soul. Explain that to me.
Absolutely, it transcends everything. So what happens is that the mind is responsible for everything. If we actually have a look at the Bhagavad Gita, it's got this fantastic example of the chariot being the body. It's got Arjun and Krishna being the soul and the superconscious, the jiva and the atma, and it's looking at the energy overall because the mind, which is the reins, is being connected and corresponding to the horses as the senses. So as we start to control the senses by taking an inward look at ourselves, we're able to gain a bigger picture of what's going on. We're able to connect with our true essence and our true nature. And isn't that the point of meditation, Tim?
That's a great start to our discussion today. But what we want to know is to get to know you a little bit more and a little bit better as well, because you got into and got attracted to the world of yoga and meditation, both perhaps at the same time or one after the other. Give us some background to that, Riddhi, if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've always been within the psychology realms of things, being very interested, very fascinated in energy, and particularly how we can actually use this energy for us. So my journey started off when I was in university. I was actually studying law, so I found that there was a lot of times of just being able to sit in a seat at the same time and to be able to take in loads of different information without the mind wandering. And this brought up a fascinating error because look around me, and a lot of people, they were relying on things like caffeine, sugar, sweets, and cakes in order to get that energy from the outside. And that made me think.
Whilst you get that energy, forgive me for interrupting you, because this is something I was dying to get into. Whilst you're trying to get that energy, you're also looking for a mental fix, as almost perhaps even a reward or a way of saying to yourself, you know what, I deserve this. You know, forget yoga and meditation, but I deserve this. I deserve this chocolate bar or this extra cake or donut.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people, they do actually look at it as a way of hitting that reward system because all of that sugar, all of that energy, it hits the dopamine system. So it's an instant reward. But that moment of instant gratification, they're missing the bigger picture. It's almost like not being able to see the trees from the woods because whilst that moment of sweetness tastes absolutely fantastic on the tongue, it is limited. It is a limited aspect. It's not enabling us to get to the root of what's going on.
And would it be fair to say that it's all very temporary whilst we talk about that subject? It's not long term. It's a temporary fix, if I may call it that.
Absolutely, yeah. You've hit the nail on the head there.
Great. So we live very busy and hectic daily lives and schedules. COVID hasn't helped with the disruption that it has caused in everyone's lives through industry, commerce, and our personal lives as well. Why do we find it so difficult to meditate in a true sense? Because we've just talked about getting a quick fix from a bar of candy or chocolate or a quick cake or something. But then when we sit down to actually meditate and look from within, look from the soul, which is something I asked you earlier, why is it so difficult to get into it?
It's a fantastic question, Tony, and let's break down that question. So there's three different parts to it. We've got tamas, we've got rajas, and we've got sattva. And these are three different gunas. It's the state of inertia, it's the state of restlessness, and it's the state of pure sattva. So the reasons actually behind this and why it's so difficult to meditate is because if we're in a state where we've been really energetic throughout the day, that's a state of rajas. And this whole rajas state is making us think, it's making our mind jump. It's almost like we're jumping to loads of different conclusions. We're seeing loads of different whys all at the same time, and we don't quite know how to distinguish the why, how to pick out the why, and to be able to distinguish that from the rest of them. So that's the state of rajas. Then we've also got the state of tamas, and tamas is more about sleepiness or laziness. So it's actually going deeper now into the psychology, into the mind being in a state of stress. Now, stress in itself can also be really good. It can actually be there to lead us to bigger and brighter things. But it's when we get overwhelmed by the stress that's the problem.
Okay, so that's interesting. We can use stress to our advantage, what you're saying to us. That's an interesting one.
Yeah.
I like that.
Absolutely, yeah. So it actually goes into the whole state there of fight, flight, or freeze. And it's how we actually think and how we perceive a situation, because it's that very perception that creates our reality.
So, whilst we try and achieve the higher state of consciousness or even meditation, and you talk about the three stages of meditation, it's easy to get lost because trying to differentiate between uh, um, the glass which is half full or the other way around, as it were. You know the cliche. Where do we stand with this? Because with the three stages of meditation, do you have to go through three each stage to achieve the higher state? So stage one is like the beginning stage, then stage two is a middle stage, and stage three is the ultimate stage, as it were, of meditation and consciousness.
Not necessarily, Tony. And I think you'll actually be really surprised by the answer as well. But it depends on an individual's nature. It
Okay.
depends on how a particular person is feeling in that very moment. And this is the whole thing about meditation, because sometimes that very thing can be the very thing that puts people off as well. But it's about cultivating that patience, cultivating that observation, and being able to sit with whatever comes up, being able to observe the thoughts, to really see the patterns of what's going on. Because once we find that pattern, then that's where the magic is.
I love that. That's where the magic is. That's good. So, what about meditation as a scientific method of gaining knowledge? Is that where we get the intensity of thought from, Riddhi?
So, meditation as a form of knowledge, and that looks at the whole state of being in a state of reception.
Hmm.
In yoga, we call it proprioception, which
Okay.
is the whole state of finding balance and equilibrium from within. So it's that stage of when we're actually doing one-legged balances, for example, and that's how to balance the body. So when it comes to balancing the mind, we're looking at Patanjali's system. We're looking at the Maharishi Patanjali, and he's come up with a fantastic system of Raja Yoga, which leads on to Gnana Yoga. And these different systems are ways of actually being able to balance the mind. It's a way of actually being able to see what's going on. So practically being able to take the mind from the outside in the whole physical reality, in the whole physical world, where we're surrounded by our surroundings, when we're in our environment, to be able to cultivate a state of presence, to go within, to be able to pay attention to our senses, to our instincts, to what's going on. So that may well be something like feeling the heartbeat or paying attention to the pulses in the fingers or the toes, and starting to really cultivate that inner energy, starting to really gain the differentiation between the mind wandering outside and the mind wandering inside. And
Hmm.
once we're actually able to create that sense of awareness within ourselves, that's really where we're starting to pay attention to dharana and dhyana. And dhyana is ultimately about getting into this whole meditative state and being able to observe the mind. But it really comes down to being present, being in the moment, not judging things, just observing things to see the wood from the trees, to be able to see the reality of the essence within.
That's so well explained, and I could listen to you all day long. But you've led me really nicely to my next question here, Riddhi, and that is the obstacles during meditation, of which there are many. And I, for one, I'll put my hands up and say, yes, I meditate, and I've meditated on many occasions, but the mind wanders. And the thing is, there are lots of obstacles that come in the way, either our general surroundings of where we're sitting, how we're sitting, temperature of the room, the ambience, or even our own thought processes, which you went into some detail about a little while ago. Tell us more about the levels involved in the process during meditation.
So the levels of meditation, there's three levels. The first is instinct. Then we're
Okay.
looking at the reasoning mind, which is the conscious and the subconscious. And then we're looking at intuition. So when we're actually looking at the instinct, it's the primitive, it's the animalistic nature within everyone. And so that's animals and humans alike. And that's that whole stage of fight or flight. And sometimes people tend to freeze in those elements as well. It's all to do with how the mind is conditioned to be able to be really receptive to what's going on within. So it's all about being able to cultivate that. Then we've actually got the reasoning mind, and the reasoning mind comes down to two things. It's the doubting mind and the thinking mind. So that's the manas and the chitta within the whole mindset within Manomaya Chitta, which is looking at the way that we're thinking. It's really about looking further, being able to cultivate the sense of attention. And that actually means paying attention to the whole way that we're actually thinking, the whole way that we're feeling in a particular moment. And it's broken down into 4 stages. And these 4 stages, it's all about creating that whole sense of belief, that whole sense of faith. So I actually put that down into a little formula, and it says, if X, if something happens, then Y. Because of a reason. So what's the outcome? So it's actually a really cool way of looking at it, to be able to distinguish when a person is in pain, because that so is almost eventually going to lead to a real state of deep inclination within themselves. They're going to face a part of themselves that they don't really want to be facing. And so then now it's about, well, how do we shift that focus? How do we shift that attention, that observation into something meaningful, into something that's actually going to help them see that they're not limited, that they are more than the limitations. Yeah. And the whole thing that you were going to before as well about this whole glass and the glass being half full, and looking at the limiting adjuncts within that as well, to actually be able to overcome those limiting adjuncts.
Beautifully explained. I have a question for you, and I'm going to bring it back to basics now, Riddhi. Is it easy to meditate?
Define easy.
Is it easy to meditate? Define easy. Define easy. Good question. Okay. All right. Touche. Meditate, to sit down and reach a state of inner consciousness. That's my technical explanation for you, for what it's worth.
Okay, fantastic. I'm so glad that you've actually asked that, because meditation, it looks at a complete science, a complete theory, a complete history behind it. So the first step is just being able to cultivate stillness in the body. And now we're not talking about yoga where we're doing like loads of different moving activities. We're just talking about being able to sit in one place, right? So that's the first thing, is just being in the right asana. The second thing is about cultivating the right breathing, and breathing is linked to the mind. So the way in which we breathe, the way in which we're taking oxygen into our body. And a lot of the times when we're in stress state, we're only breathing into our chest. And that is not complete abdominal breathing. When we actually manage to start to relax and we're in a parasympathetic state, which is all about rest and digestion, we start to use our abdomen muscles. And we start to use 3-level breathing. So it's abdomen, chest, and the upper chest. And it makes a complete difference to the energy that we're feeling, the way that we're moving or not moving. And so this whole sense of asana and pranayama cultivate a real sense of pratyahara. Now, what on earth am I talking about when it comes to pratyahara? It's all about the senses. It's all about the way that we're paying attention, the way that we're focusing our energy. So it's about going from the outside. So maybe we're hearing the sound of a ticking clock, or the sound of a fan turning, the sound of one of those helicopters going off the top of the roofs. I actually live in Heathrow, so I hear the planes going over my head every now and then. So it's about going from the external environment into the internal environment. That internal environment is then when we start to pay attention to what's truly going on, to what we're truly feeling. So it goes in stages to be able to get from dharana to dhyana. Chapter 6 of the Bhagavad Gita says it really well, where we start to actually pay attention. And it says something as simple as a focus point. So a focus point between the eyebrows as Ajna Chakra. And this whole thing is basically, it's a sense of taking in light. It's a sense of taking in energy, but it's a sense of feeling completely relaxed. And just for those few moments, it may only be a few seconds, but to really be able to cultivate that silence within. Because at the end of the day, the soul is all about the silence. It's all about us realizing that we are more than our ego, that ego is given this fascinating name sometimes, but it's not all a bad thing. There are really cool elements to it. We're limited because of our physical reality. So our physical elements, the 5 elements, limit us, but we are more than those 5 elements. We're actually able to then go within. When we go within, we realize this fantastic thing of actually, we don't need all of those caffeine, all of that sugar, all of those cakes on the outside to be able to fill up our cups. We are actually ultimately unlimited potential, unlimited consciousness. And we're able to link to that by directly being able to fill up our own cups, because we're able to link to that energy within. We're able to get a grasp, just a little grasp of what's actually going on there, to be able to transform that into something far greater. And that whole sense of stillness, yoga chitti vritti nirodha, which is looking at the vrittis, looking at the thought patterns and the way that they are changing and churning, and this fantastic thing. And when our mind wanders, it's just about being able to cultivate that sense of coming back to that focal point, coming back to that sense of energy within. So is it difficult to meditate? Well, it depends on a couple of things. It depends on being able to hold a still position, breathing correctly, breathing in a way that fills us up from within, bringing our senses inwards, bringing our senses to a moment of stillness and observing those thoughts. As long as we're not running away from our thoughts, we're cultivating that awareness of our thoughts, we're meditating, we're starting to think differently. And this is actually a fantastic point, because sometimes we actually think, well, meditation, come on, meditation must be that time when there are no thoughts whatsoever. Yeah. It's just complete stillness. It's nothing else. It can't be anything else. I've just got to sit here and I'm going to think and just completely churn out everything else. But actually, when we look at it, it goes far deeper. There is so much more going on. And every single time, it's just about cultivating that sense of presence, cultivating that sense of attention again.
Fantastic. So well. We are talking with Riddhi Vyas, and as you've heard, Riddhi Vyas is a wellness and meditation expert, in inverted commas, and hasn't she explained that well? These are the Living Bridge conversations right here. Compliments of iGlobal. You're very welcome, and thanks for joining us if you have joined us, and we do welcome your comments as well. We're going to take a short break and we'll continue talking with Riddhi just after this.
iGlobal Radio is the brand new hub of podcasts for and about global Indians. News, views, interviews, wellness, money matters, and much, much more. Tune in to iGlobal Radio at iglobalnews.com.
Riddhi, the thing is, I could listen to you all day long with the wealth of information that you've shared with us already. There's so much to take away from that. But for the benefit of our listeners and viewers, a little bit about the Living Bridge conversations. These have been curated by iGlobal to bring you many such discussions and deliberations. And they will include many food recipes, musical journeys, heartwarming anecdotes, energetic fitness routines, festive fashion, and much, much more, which is just great, isn't it? And it's right up my street, I tell you. Now, we'd love you to stay tuned to iGlobal social media channels for updates on our regular streams with an array of guests that embody the British Indian diaspora Living Bridge. And of course, you, our viewers and listeners, are at the heart of these conversations. So do join in with your questions and comments in the comments box, and we'll pick them up as we go along. And I'm sure Riddhi would be more than delighted to answer those for us here today. We'll be getting back to our amazing discussion, which I just can't get enough of today. It's fantastic. One of the questions I do have for you is this. What I find when I try to meditate is that the mind wanders, and we did touch on this a little earlier on, and you went into a great explanation about this. But I want to delve into this a little bit more with you, if I may. How can we fix this wandering of the mind when we sit down or we get into our positions to meditate? Can it help us with that?
Absolutely. So one of the things around the mind wandering, why does the mind wander? It's because it's built up of two things ultimately. So we've got doubts and we've got unrealistic expectations. And these doubts and these unrealistic expectations is distracting the mind. So the mind is no longer focused. When the mind is no longer focused, the mind is going in all sorts of different directions. So it's being split, it's called mind splitting, where it's just thinking about loads of different things. There is no focal point, there is no focus point to that. So what can we actually do about that? Instead of the mind going outwards, and we've spoken about this today, where it's going out into the environment and we're not actually being present within, we're not cultivating that sense of presence. What we're actually looking at here is the restless mind. And the restless mind, it's built up of desires. Think of it this way, the mind itself is just a bundle. It's a bundle of like loads of different wires, loads of different thought patterns that are going on. It's all really jumbled. So the whole point of this is something called Vikshepa Shakti. And Vikshepa Shakti, it's all bringing us back into a state of sattva. It's a state of goodness within. So mind wandering, it's all about rajas. It's about where the mind is going off into loads of different directions. It's restless. Yeah. So now we're going from a state of restless to the state of goodness. So how can we actually do that? Well, there's a couple of different ways in which to actually do this. One of the ways is by just breathing. And it sounds like it's really obvious when we're just breathing every day. It's one of those things that are just an automatic function. There's got to be more to it. Well, actually, it's about creating that sense of awareness. So even of demonstrators, so if we're looking at something like Ujjayi Pranayam, for example, Ujjayi Pranayam, it sounds a bit like an ocean. So it goes, now that is really, we don't tend to think about it, but what are we doing on a physical, on a psychological level? We're releasing the muscles in the jaw. We're loosening this. When we loosen the jaw muscles, the mind starts to relax. So now all of a sudden, we can't go like this, right? We're not in the state of tension. We're in a state of relaxation.
We're not frowning, we're not closing our eyes, we're not frowning, we're not closing our eyes, and we're not short of breath either.
Exactly. We're starting to gain that energy from within.
Okay.
And so then what we can actually do is translate it from the state of being open in our mouth to then being able to close the mouth and do the same thing. And it's an amazing technique.
Now we're
breathing. We can
breathing
do it anywhere, any day.
So now we're taking deep breaths through the nose and not the mouth.
Exactly.
Okay.
And also, we're starting to engage the senses at this stage as well, because the very last sense to go is the hearing. And the hearing is starting to pay attention to this whole calm sense. It's starting to gain an attention. And because it's doing all of this, it's also linking to the way that sound vibrations work within the body. It's linking to the way that we use our energy. It's also, another example there is something called a practice of anuloma viloma. And this is just alternating nostril breathing. So we're alternating then from the left side to the right side. Now, why is this really good? Well, for a couple of reasons. First reason is that we're using Ida and Pingala breathing, which is all about nerves. It's all about cultivating. The right nostril is linked to the left side of the brain, which is our logical brain. The left side of the nostril is linked to our right side, which is about emotions. So now, in the sense of logic and emotions, we're starting to gain balance. Gaining balance is what's giving us the ability to make those choices. It's what's giving us the ability to be able to cultivate a sense of presence when we're in those difficult meetings, we're in those difficult negotiations, and we've got to be able to make decisions. We've got to be able to think fast on our feet. So by doing these different practices, and we could be doing it anywhere, anytime, it's really just taking that 5 minutes out of our busy schedule to get present, to bring the mind within, to not be attracted to our senses which are going outwards, but to bring the mind within to a state of stillness, pranayama, the different ways in which we're actually getting oxygen into our body. Not only is it mental, not only is it physical, it's also psychological. So it's a mix of all of those different elements coming together.
That's wonderful, and I understand the sense of creating that balance and equilibrium that you talk about between the senses. But what about some ways or practical ways in which we can find that meditation helps us in our daily lives? You've gone into great detail about this. Thank you for that already in our discussion today. But could you give us, for example, 3 practical ways in which we can find that meditation helps us through our daily routine lives?
Absolutely. So the first way is actually going from tamas to rajas. Now, what do I actually mean by this? So sometimes when we're actually been sitting for long periods of time, we might well start to find that the energy is starting to dull a little bit. Think about when it comes to 5 o'clock in the evening, we've been at our desk since 9 o'clock. The energy throughout the day, if all we've done is sat in the same place and we haven't got up, we haven't gone for a brisk walk, we haven't done anything active during that time, the energy starts to sit within the root chakra. So it's all focused, it's all centralized. Now, the second that we actually move around, we start to work our muscles, we start to pump that oxygen and that blood back around the body. It starts to be able to wake up the body. So what we're doing is removing the body, removing the prana, removing the blood, and it starts to bring us into a state of rajas. Now, when we're in a state of rajas, we're taking that attention from being in our environment. So it may well be that we've got power situations that are going on at work, for example, or maybe in a different situation. So it could be a sense of actually going from being within a large group, being with loads of different conversations, to being able to control those situations and bringing it back to a sense of me. Now, the sense of me comes back to the ego. So how now do we actually translate from the ego to, which is I, my, me, all about me, hello, to a state of sattva? So a state of sattva is realizing our true nature, being able to meditate on those qualities that we want to cultivate, having that future outlook of what is it that I want? What do I want my future to look like? And being able to create that. And it's simply, sometimes people really overcomplicate this, but it's just as simple as the thought power, the thought of being able to pay attention to what's coming up, to be able to translate that into a quality. So, for example, if I'm in a state of serving, if I'm in a state of giving, I've got to be able to use my hands. I've got to be able to use my actions to be able to do that. If I'm in a state of meditating and going within, then now I'm actually starting to cultivate a different part of my system, starting to cultivate the heart. I'm starting to actually pay attention to serving with power. Now, it's all about cultivating the presence of these different systems more or less at the same time, because during the course of the day, we'll be doing different things at different times. These different activities in different ways will start to use different parts of the mind, be that prana, be that the mind, be that serving, giving. So we've got all of these different elements that play a part within our day-to-day lives.
Okay.
So we're
While we look at meditation in helping us with our daily lives, which you've explained in great detail. Thank you for that. Lots to take away from that. We need to understand that meditation is effective. And so finally then, Riddhi, if you could tell us what your message is to the uninitiated people amongst us on incorporating meditation into their routines. And I'm going to give you a double-sided question here, because there's 2 parts to this question. That was part 1, and part 2 of the question is, how do we know that meditation is effective?
That's a really good question. So if we actually look at sleep, a lot of the times people during a long meditation retreat, for example, Vipassana meditations, it's to do with the way that we're starting to actually use our mind and our bodies at the same time. So when we're meditating, we're feeling a sense of lightness within the body. We're feeling a sense of energy. We're feeling the mind being alert, feeling energized. When we're in a state of sleep, it's the complete opposite. Our body starts to feel heavy. We start to lose our energy. We start to lose that vital forces. Our mind starts to switch itself off. So it's the way that we're actually using our energy, and using our energy, using that vital force within to do the activities that we do on a day-to-day basis.
And so determining the fact that meditation is effective, will we instinctively know within ourselves that meditation is working for us?
A lot of people, they tend to go to meditation because they want something from meditation. They have an expectation, they have a desire deep within, and they feel as if this expectation, this desire is not fulfilled, then they have failed at meditation. It's not about failing. We're not living in a binary mindset where we're thinking of success and failure. We're living now in a mindset where we're starting to cultivate that courage and that patience. Meditation is a long-term game that we can start at any place, anywhere, whenever we feel ready. And the simplest way to actually start is just to focus on our breathing. And don't we all have to breathe? Isn't it an autonomic system within ourselves? It's an autonomic system within all human beings that we've got to be able to breathe. And luckily, there's a part of the mind that does that for us.
Yes.
But when we start to cultivate a sense of awareness, we start to feel that oxygen filling up our lungs, filling up our body. It's a completely different mindset. We start to feel alive. We start to feel present. We start to gain all of that energy. And then it's about actually using that energy for us, not having to go to the outside sources, but coming from
Indeed.
within.
And so are the benefits of meditation, which you've explained to us. Thank you for that. We'll take a quick break and we'll be back right after these words.
iEntertainment is brought to you by iGlobal for all the latest film and series reviews, starry interviews and cinema listings covering Bollywood and beyond to reflect a truly pan-Indian entertainment spectrum. Check out the latest at iGlobalnews.com.
And so, therefore, if you didn't know anything about meditation, you do now. And you can always look back and listen back and watch these episodes on iGlobalnews.com. And as we get ready to wrap up the show, don't forget, if you want to send us your comments, you're more than welcome to do it. Riddhi Vyas, you are a wellness and meditation expert and a qualified yoga and meditation teacher. Thank you so much for the insight that you've given us today and the kind time that you spared to be with us to explain what meditation is all about and giving us a different insight and such detail into our conversation today, into our Living Bridge conversations. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
So there we are then, and that's the end of today's show. Remember that you can always play back any of the past sessions under the videos section of iGlobalnews.com or on our Facebook and YouTube channels. And for more Living Bridge conversations, stay tuned at iGlobalnews.com. Meanwhile, do keep your feedback and comments and questions coming in. And also your entries. Remember, your entries for the iGlobal Diwali photography and essay competition. Lots of great prizes to be won there, so you can't go wrong. Okay. And the address for that is info@iglobalnews.com. There you go. That's the address to send in your entries to. That's info@iglobalnews.com. So until next time, from me, Tani Patty and Riddhi Vyas, thank you so much for joining us, and bye-bye for now.
iEntertainment is brought to you by iGlobal for all the latest film and series reviews, star interviews and cinema listings covering Bollywood and beyond to reflect a truly pan-Indian entertainment spectrum. Check out the latest at iglobalnews.com.